The room looked like a place where people came to be seen, not to feel. Soft lights hung from the ceiling, glowing warmly over polished floors and expensive chairs. The piano stood at the center, black and shining, like it belonged to someone important. Around it sat people dressed carefully, their voices low, their laughter controlled. They spoke about concerts they had attended, teachers they knew, and places they had traveled. Music, for them, was something to judge, something to compare, something that proved who mattered. She stood near the back at first, almost unnoticed. Her clothes were clean but simple, chosen for comfort rather than display. She held her hands together, fingers lightly touching, as if they remembered shapes the room could not see. She did not push forward. She did not interrupt anyone. She simply watched and listened. This was not the kind of place she usually entered. She knew that the moment she stepped inside, the air itself felt different, heavy with confidence and quiet pride. Still, she had come with purpose, even if that purpose was not clear to anyone else. People glanced at her and then away. Some noticed her shoes, worn but polished. Some noticed the way she kept her eyes lowered, not in fear, but in patience. A few whispered, their mouths half covered by smiles that were not kind. They assumed they knew her story already. Near the front sat a man whose voice carried easily across the room. He leaned back in his chair, one arm resting carelessly on the side. Others listened closely when he spoke. His opinions were treated like facts. He had judged many performers before, and people trusted his judgment. Tonight, he looked bored. As the room settled, someone mentioned that the piano was open for those who wished to play. A polite offer, made without real expectation. A few smiled. No one moved. That was when she took a step forward. The sound of her movement caught attention. Heads turned slowly. Some looked surprised, others amused. She walked with calm steps, not rushing, not stopping. Her heart beat faster, but her face remained steady. The man at the front raised his eyebrows. He looked her over openly, without shame. Then he laughed, a short sound that cut through the quiet. "If you can play that piano," he said, his voice filled with mock interest, "maybe I'll notice you." A few people laughed with him. Others smiled politely, unsure whether to react. The words were sharp, wrapped in humor, but they landed hard. The room waited. She stopped walking for a brief moment. The silence grew heavier. Everyone expected her to turn back, to feel embarrassed, to disappear quietly the way people like her were supposed to. But she did not. She lifted her head slightly and looked toward the piano. Not at the man, not at the crowd, just at the instrument. Her face showed no anger, no pride, only focus. She nodded once, as if agreeing with something only she could hear. Years earlier, music had been the only thing that listened to her. In small rooms, late nights, and quiet mornings, she had played when no one was watching. Not for praise, not for applause, but because it helped her breathe, because it held her together when life felt uneven and loud. Those memories did not rush in all at once. They settled calmly, like familiar hands on her shoulders. Behind her, whispers grew louder. "Does she even know how to play?" Someone murmured, "This should be interesting." Another said, smiling. She reached the piano bench and stood there for a moment. She did not sit right away. Instead, she placed her hand gently on the edge of the piano. The surface was cool and smooth, familiar. The man at the front leaned forward now, curiosity slowly replacing his boredom. He expected failure. Everyone did. She adjusted the bench and sat down. Her posture was natural, not forced. Her shoulders relaxed. Her feet found their place without thought. These small movements spoke quietly of experience, though few noticed. She rested her hands above the keys but did not play yet. The silence stretched again. Some people shifted in their seats. Someone cleared their throat. The air felt tight, as if the room itself was holding its breath. She closed her eyes for just a second. In that brief moment, she was no longer in the room. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere safe, somewhere honest. When she opened her eyes, they were calm. Her fingers hovered, ready. In the room, still full of doubt and quiet judgment, waited without knowing that nothing would be the same after the first note. The room stayed quiet longer than anyone expected. A few seconds felt like a full minute. People shifted in their seats, crossed their arms, leaned closer, or leaned back with doubt. No one spoke, but every face carried a thought. Most of those thoughts were the same. She is about to embarrass herself. She felt the weight of those thoughts even without looking up. Years of being underestimated had taught her how to recognize that silence. It had a certain sound to it, heavy, judgmental, waiting for a mistake. Her hands were still above the keys. She had not touched them yet, not because she was afraid, but because she needed one more breath, just one. The piano smelled faintly of wood and polish. It reminded her of places she had practiced before. Old rooms, borrowed spaces, corners of buildings where no one cared how long she stayed, as long as she stayed quiet. She learned early how to be invisible. Music was the one place where she did not have to be. She remembered the first piano she ever touched. It was not beautiful like this one. Some keys were chipped, others stuck, but it made sound, and that was enough. She had pressed one key again and again, smiling every time it answered her. No audience, no laughter, just sound and feeling. Here, everything was different, too clean, too perfect, too full of people who believed they already knew what talent looked like. Someone near the back whispered again, not even trying to hide it this time. She's taking too long. Another voice replied softly. Maybe she doesn't know what to play. She heard them, but they did not reach her the way they wanted to. Her focus was narrowing, slowly closing around the piano like hands around something fragile. The man at the front checked his watch. His mouth curved into a small smile, the kind people use when they feel certain they are right. She noticed none of that. Instead, she remembered a night when the power had gone out in her neighborhood. No lights, no noise, just darkness and quiet. She had found an old keyboard and played by memory, letting the notes guide her fingers. That night, she had cried without knowing why. The music had pulled something out of her that words never could. That was the feeling she was looking for now. Her fingers lowered and touched the keys lightly, without pressing them. The contact alone sent a calm through her body. This was familiar. This was hers. She straightened slightly, her back relaxed but steady. She did not look at the audience. She did not look at the man who had mocked her. If she did, the room would take something from her that she needed to keep. The piano was enough. In the seats, a woman folded her arms, already disappointed. A young man leaned forward, curious but unsure. Another guest sighed quietly, wishing the moment would end so the evening could move on. No one expected what was coming. She placed her feet properly, adjusting them without thinking. These were movements learned through repetition, not training halls or famous teachers, but long hours alone. The kind of learning that sinks into the body and stays there. Her hands hovered again, this time closer. She inhaled slowly, filling her chest, then let the air out just as slowly. Her mind grew quiet. When she pressed the first key, it was soft, almost too soft to notice. A simple sound, gentle and careful. A few people raised their eyebrows. Someone smiled, as if to say, "That's it." She played another note, then another. The melody was plain at first, clean, almost innocent. The kind of tune a beginner might choose. A few heads tilted. The man at the front relaxed back into his chair, satisfied. But she was not finished. As the melody continued, something underneath it began to change. The timing shifted slightly. The notes leaned into each other. The simple tune started to carry weight. One conversation stopped mid-whisper. A woman near the aisle frowned, listening more closely. She did not rush. She let each note settle before moving on. The piano responded warmly, filling the room in a way that surprised even her. The sound carried. It wrapped around the chairs and walls and reached places the silence could not. Her face remained calm, but inside, she was opening doors she usually kept closed. Memories moved through her fingers, loss, hope, long waiting, quiet joy, small victories no one had seen. The melody grew richer, deeper, not louder, just fuller. The man at the front leaned forward again, his smile fading. His eyes stayed on her hands now. Someone in the back stopped breathing for a moment without realizing it. The room had changed. Though few could explain how. She still did not look up. She followed the music where it wanted to go, trusting it the way she always had. This was not about proving anything. This was about telling the truth in the only language she knew how to speak. A wrong note would not have stopped her. A laugh would not have broken her. She had played through worse, played through tears, played through hunger, played through nights when quitting felt easier than continuing. Here, in this polished room, she played the same way. The tune lifted slightly, opening into something brighter. A soft strength filled the space. People sat up straighter without realizing why. The piano no longer felt like an object in the center of the room. It felt like a voice, and it was only the beginning. By the time the melody reached its center, the room no longer felt the same. It was not loud. Nothing dramatic had happened yet. Still, something invisible had shifted. People were no longer waiting for her to fail. They were listening. She felt it without opening her eyes. The air had softened. The tightness was gone. The silence between notes now felt full instead of empty. Her fingers moved with more freedom. The piano responded easily, as if it had been waiting for her touch all along. Each key carried weight, not because she pressed harder, but because she pressed with meaning. She remembered mornings when she practiced before the city woke up. Cold rooms, fingers stiff from sleep. She would play quietly so no one would complain. Those mornings taught her control, taught her how to make even soft notes matter. Now, those lessons lived in her hands. The melody began to travel, slowly climbing, then pulling back. It was no longer simple. It carried turns that surprised the ear. A few people leaned forward without realizing it. Someone near the front lowered their phone, forgotten. The man who had sneered earlier sat very still. His eyes followed her hands closely now. His expression was not mocking anymore. It was cautious, almost confused. She did not see him. She was far away, somewhere between memory and sound. She felt the music in her chest, steady and warm. It reminded her why she never stopped playing, even when no one cared, even when there was no room, no audience, no promise of anything more. The tune dipped into a lower range. The sound grew deeper, carrying a quiet sadness. Not heavy, not dark, but honest. A few listeners felt something tighten inside them. They did not know why. A woman near the aisle pressed her lips together, eyes shining. She had not expected to feel anything tonight. The pianist's shoulders stayed relaxed. Her breathing matched the rhythm. Every movement looked natural, unforced. This was not a performance built to impress. It was a story unfolding. The room was fully still now. No whispers, no laughter, no restless movement. Only music. She let a pause stretch longer than expected. One note faded, and she waited before the next. That space held more power than sound. People leaned into it, afraid to break it. Then she continued. The melody returned, but changed, stronger, clearer. The notes carried confidence now, like someone who had walked through difficulty and come out steady on the other side. The man at the front sat upright, hands clasped together. His jaw tightened slightly. He was listening in a way he was not used to. Someone in the back swallowed hard. She felt heat rise behind her eyes but did not let it distract her. Emotion had always been part of her playing. She had learned how to let it flow without drowning in it. The piano sang under her fingers, not loudly, not softly, exactly as it needed to. She remembered being told once that real talent needs permission, that without the right space, the right people, the right approval, it would never be seen. She had believed that for a long time. Tonight, she realized how wrong that was. The music swelled gently, filling the room. It wrapped around the audience, touching places they did not expect to be touched. No one thought about status now. No one thought about appearances. They felt. Her hands crossed briefly, moving with ease. A small detail, but one that made a few trained eyes widen. This was not luck. This was not guessing. The man at the front exhaled slowly. The melody reached a moment of release, then softened again, like a deep breath after holding something heavy for too long. The room breathed with it. She still did not look up. She did not need to. The piano bench creaked slightly as she shifted, barely noticeable. The sound blended into the music, natural and real. She thought of the times she had played just to survive the day, times when music was the only place she felt understood. Those moments shaped her more than any lesson ever could. Now that life was pouring out through the keys, a man near the back wiped his eyes quickly, hoping no one noticed. The tune climbed once more, this time brighter. Not loud, not showy, just open, hopeful. The room felt lighter. She allowed herself a small change in tempo, subtle but intentional. The piano responded, filling the space with warmth. A few listeners smiled without knowing why. The man who had mocked her earlier leaned back slowly, as if realizing something about himself that he did not like. His confidence wavered. She reached the final section of the piece. She knew it well. She had ended here many times before, alone. Tonight, it felt different. The notes slowed, each one placed carefully, lovingly. The sound lingered. As the final note faded, she let her hands rest on the keys for a moment longer than necessary. Not for drama, just to honor the silence that followed. No one moved. No one spoke. The room held its breath, suspended between what had been and what was about to happen, and she sat there quietly, eyes open now, looking at the piano as if it were an old friend, unaware that she had already changed everything. The silence after the final note felt heavier than any sound she had played. It did not rush away. It stayed, wide and deep, settling over the room like a held breath that no one dared release. She slowly lifted her hands from the keys. Her fingers felt warm, alive. She rested them in her lap, still facing the piano. She did not turn around. Not yet. For a brief moment, she wondered if she had gone too far. Not with the music, but with herself. She had opened something personal in front of strangers who had not asked for it. That thought passed quickly. The truth was already out there. It could not be taken back. A chair creaked somewhere behind her. Someone shifted. Another person inhaled sharply. Then a single clap echoed through the room. It was hesitant, almost unsure. Another followed. Then another. The sound grew, spreading from one corner to the next. Applause rose slowly at first, like people checking if it was allowed. Then it gained strength, filling the space fully. Not polite, not forced, real. She stood up quietly as the sound surrounded her. Her legs felt steady. She turned to face the room for the first time since she sat down. What she saw surprised her. Faces that once held doubt now showed something else. Respect, wonder, even humility. A few people clapped with their hands high, eyes fixed on her. Others nodded slowly, as if still processing what they had felt. The man who had mocked her earlier was standing now. His applause was slower than the others, heavier. His face was serious. The confidence he carried before looked different now, thinner somehow. She met his eyes for just a second. Not with anger, not with pride, just calm. Then she looked away. She gave a small nod to the room. No smile, no bow, just acknowledgement. As the applause faded, murmurs began to rise. People leaned toward each other, whispering with surprise, "I didn't expect that. That was something else. Where did she come from?" She heard none of it clearly. The sound blurred together. Her ears were still full of music. Someone near the front spoke louder than the others. A respected voice. They praised her technique, her control, her emotion. Words like rare and gifted floated through the air. She listened politely, but the praise felt distant. She had learned long ago that words fade faster than moments. The man who had sneered earlier cleared his throat. The room quieted again. "I may have spoken too quickly," he said. His voice was different now, less sharp. That was unexpected. It was not an apology, but it was close. She nodded once, accepting it without comment. People began to approach her, one by one. Some offered compliments. Others asked where she studied, who trained her, where she usually played. She answered simply, "I play where I can. I learned by myself. I practice when there is time." Her answers confused some of them, impressed others. A woman touched her arm gently and said the music reminded her of something she had forgotten. She did not explain what. She did not need to. As the room slowly returned to movement, she stepped away from the piano. The space around it felt different now, less like a stage, more like a shared place. She walked toward a quiet corner and stood there, breathing. Her heart finally began to slow. For years, she had imagined moments like this, not the applause, but the feeling of being heard. She had wondered if it would change her, if it would fill the empty spaces she carried. It did not change her. It reminded her. She was the same person she had been before she touched the keys. The same hands, the same memories, the same quiet strength. The man approached her again, alone this time. He stopped a few steps away, unsure. "You should play more often," he said. "People like this need to hear you." She smiled softly. "Just once. People hear what they are ready to hear," she replied. He nodded, thinking the evening continued around her. But she felt detached from it now. The tension was gone. The challenge had passed. As she prepared to leave, she glanced back at the piano one last time. It stood quietly, unchanged, as if nothing special had happened. She knew better. She walked out into the night, the cool air brushing her face. The sounds of the room faded behind her. She did not know what would come next. Opportunities, attention, or nothing at all. But she knew one thing. No matter where she went, the music would go with her. And that was enough. The night air felt cooler than she expected. It brushed her face and slowed her steps as she walked away from the building. Streetlights hummed softly. Cars passed in the distance. Life moved on, unchanged by what had just happened inside. She paused for a moment on the sidewalk. The sound of applause still echoed faintly in her ears, but it no longer felt loud. It felt gentle now, like a memory settling into place. She had walked out of rooms before with nothing but doubt in her chest. Tonight was different, not because people had clapped, not because someone important had noticed her. It was different because she had listened to herself. She took a deep breath and continued walking. At home, the room was quiet. The kind of quiet she knew well. She set her bag down and turned on a small lamp. Its warm light filled the space slowly. Nothing here looked impressive. A chair, a table, an old keyboard resting against the wall. She touched the keys lightly, without turning it on. Habit. Her hands remembered everything. She sat down and let the silence stay for a while. The night had taken a lot out of her, not in a painful way, in a full way. She thought about the faces in the room, the surprise, the disbelief, the respect that followed. She did not feel proud the way people expect pride to feel. She felt calm. For a long time, she had believed that moments like that belonged to other people. People with connections, people with confidence that showed before they spoke, people who were welcomed before they ever played a note. She had learned to wait quietly, but waiting had never stopped her from playing. The next morning came early. Sunlight slipped through the window and landed on the floor. She made herself a simple breakfast and sat near the window, watching the city wake up. Her phone buzzed. A message, then another. Someone from the event had shared her contact, a small invitation, a question about playing again sometime. Nothing grand, nothing promised. She smiled softly. She did not answer right away. She went for a walk instead. The streets felt familiar. People passed her without looking twice. That felt right. She liked being unseen when she chose to be. As she walked, memories followed her. Moments when she almost quit. Times when her hands hurt too much. When she wondered if loving music was enough. She remembered a day when someone told her to be realistic, to find something safer, something that paid faster. She had nodded then. She always nodded. But she had kept playing. That choice had never been easy. It still was in single quotes t. Later that afternoon, she returned home and sat at her keyboard. She turned it on and played quietly. Not the same piece. Something new. Something unfinished. The notes came slowly. She let them. She was no longer playing to prove anything. She had already done that without meaning to. The days that followed were steady. A few more messages. A few small chances. Nothing overwhelming. Nothing that changed her overnight. She accepted some. She declined others. Each time she played, she remembered the silence before the applause. That moment when doubt filled the room. That moment when she chose to stay. That choice mattered more than anything else. One evening, she returned to a modest hall, not as a surprise guest, not as someone to be tested. She was invited this time. The room was smaller, the piano less polished. She liked it better. People listened closely. Some closed their eyes, some smiled, some simply sat still. She played with the same honesty she always had afterward. There was applause again. Warm and simple, she thanked them and stepped away outside. The sky was dark and wide. She felt tired in a good way. She realized then that recognition had not changed her path. It had only lit it briefly, like a passing light. What carried her forward was the same thing it always had. Music. Time passed. She continued to play in different places. Sometimes for crowds, sometimes for empty rooms, sometimes just for herself. She learned to say yes when it felt right, to say no when it did. In single quotes t. The memory of the snare faded. The memory of the music stayed. One night, alone again, she sat at her keyboard and played the same opening notes from that evening. Soft, simple. She smiled. She stopped and let the silence return. She understood now that the world would always judge before it listened. That some people would never hear past their own expectations. That was no longer her concern. She had noticed herself, and that was more than enough.